On today's show, we'll recap a busy Monday in the nation's capital, where General Manager Steve Staios continued putting his stamp on the Ottawa Senators.
Staios made two separate trades, one of them with a former first-rounder coming back in return.
We'll get into all that, plus the fallout from Mad Sogard's re-signing on today's Locked On Sens.
I'm Jake Sanderson.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome! You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. You can also follow us on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter. The show is available everywhere you get podcasts, including on YouTube. Today is Tuesday, July 16th, and Pilsy, I got to put my hand up. I was wrong on yesterday's show, and I have a different opinion because of it.
Okay, well, what part were you wrong? We're wrong about a lot of things, Ross, so you're going to have to clarify.
You don't want to credit me for putting my hand up and saying, hey, look at me. I'm the guy that was wrong yesterday. I said that Mad Sogard required waivers next year. Turns out because of how short the time was when he came over, his pro seasons only began accruing the following year. So I'm going to blame this one on Cap Friendly being sold because they had that perfect waivers calculator. But Mad Sogard does not need waivers this upcoming training camp. And that's huge for him because I think one more year of AHL seasoning is what he needs before jumping into the NHL. And timeline-wise, that works great with Forsberg going into the last year of his deal.
Yeah, that's good news. We'll blame the Washington Capitals, Ross, for buying Cap Friendly and taking that valuable resource away from us. But that is massive because we were talking about that, and I kind of said, well, if Mads needs waivers, they're probably going to go with Levi Merlin, if there's an injury for a short amount of time. But I think you'd still prefer to have Mads be the guy as he's still the top goalie prospect here. And you mentioned, Ross, that you thought maybe the AHL salary and the one way on the second year of the deal might scare teams off. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. So that's nice.
So he would have needed to have 60 NHL games under his belt by right now for him to be in that situation of needing waivers. Of course, he falls short of that. Therefore, Mad Sogard is your starter in Belleville this season, I would say, with a check mark beside it. Put it in pen. I know Marylinen's going to push him for starts, but I think Mads needs to have another 50-game season under his belt to really get into that groove and take the next step in his development. But boy, that feels like old news already, and it's not even 24 hours old because Steve Staios made a pair of moves, one of which was already well on its way to completion as we finished yesterday's show. Roby Jarventie has been traded to the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for Xavier, Bourgault, and Jake Chiasson from the Bakersfield Condors, and in Chiasson's case, in the ECHL last season. Chiasson was a mid-round pick in 2021, and Borgo was a first-round pick in 2021, but because Borgo was one of the oldest players in his draft class and Jarventie one of the youngest in his, the two players are actually only 2 months apart in birth years. So pretty much a swap of two prospects who just kind of felt like fresh starts were needed by their organizations.
Yeah, I would definitely say that's the case for Xavier Borgo, Ross. From everything I've read, it seems like the Edmonton Oilers and the Bakersfield Condors just didn't really give him the opportunity that he needed to thrive. I don't necessarily know if I would say that Roby Jarventie needed a new opportunity or start because he had opportunities to play in the NHL last season. He was put in positions to succeed in Belleville when he was healthy, and he did succeed when he was healthy. Like, look at his last 2 years in Belleville for Roby Jarventie, Ross. In 2022, 2023, 40 games, 30 points. That's solid. And then last year, 22 games, 20 points, almost a point per game clip when he was in Belleville. So I think if you're Steve Staios, this is probably just you looking at Roby Jarventie, who unfortunately has had a lot of injury problems, in particular with his knees. And you're looking at a guy that still has some value, and maybe you're concerned about the injuries in the future. So you want to try to trade him now while his value is still there and other teams still see the potential, and try to get a guy with potential in return. And keep in mind, Steve Staios would have seen Xavier Bourgault in his time with the Edmonton Oilers. So he would have had a probably pretty good look and understanding of what this player is, and maybe therefore an understanding of, okay, the Oilers and Bakersfield have been utilizing this player wrong the entire time. If we bring him over, put him in a spot to succeed, get him up clicking on the power play in Belleville, we can make something out of this player. So I think it's a fair swap, and both teams are getting a potential offensive player, but a lot of work to do for both these guys as they're both in their early 20s.
They're changing a left shot in Roby for a right shot in Xavier Borgo. In the next segment, we'll get into what Borgo's background is and how we think he fits into this system. And then when we finish up today's show, we'll get into the depth charts. And I've highlighted all of the players that have been brought in by this new regime over the last 10 months. And it went from, whoa, they haven't done anything other than add Boris Kachuk and a couple minor leaguers, to now their stamp is certainly visible on this roster. But looking at Roby in particular, it's a very interesting case because we were high on him. Red light Roby, ripping it up in Eels right after being drafted. Pro League, he was 17, just turned 18. And we're like, wow, this guy, it would be great to see him come over to America sooner rather than later. What does he do? Comes over the end of that season, 3 points in 4 games. Like, all right, getting his feet under him. I think that the next step is going to be there for him. And it was just that kind of streaky scorer that we see so often in the NHL and in pro leagues, where it's like when he's on, man, there's not many guys who can fill the net like him. But there were also 6, 7, 8 game stretches where he'd have 1 point. And I think what really shone a light on that during his development was the case of his 2 World Juniors, right? One of them, he was great. He was putting up points. He was a trusted member there on Team Finland. And the year before, 0 points in 6 games, was benched for one of them as well, right? Then he comes out the next year, has 9 points in 7 games. So it's kind of the case of Roby Jarventie. So maybe Steve Staios thinks, hey, I need a guy who I think can play NHL minutes, maybe not the upside of Jarventie. There's a less of a chance that Borgo could be a top 6 guy, but the probability that Borgo could fit into a bottom 6 role eventually is much higher than Jarventie. Jarventie is one of those guys where if he's not playing with guys who have pace and have playmaking, he might not give you as much as a guy who can be a bit more of a toolsy player that might not have the offensive numbers, but he's going to be more consistent at the top level if they get there. There's a chance both these guys don't get there. And I think at that point, you just have to look at, hey, maybe both teams tried to create this spark and there was no fire to have.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The inconsistencies with Roby's game were definitely tough, but like I mentioned, in the last 2 years, he was a pretty consistent, or I shouldn't say consistent because maybe there were stretches where he was cold, but he put up good point per game numbers in his last 2 years in Belleville. And the thing with Roby is his release is what was so lethal. Like, Ross, didn't we, I forget what it was for or what time frame we did it for, but maybe it was the World Juniors. We did like a highlight clip, or we watched a highlight reel where we timed how long the puck was on Roby's stick for all of his goals. And it was like total for, I think it was the World Juniors. Maybe if you remember what I'm talking about, maybe you can help me out here, but it was like 2 seconds for all his goals that he scored, like just on a stick, off a stick, release in that sweet spot in the power play and scoring. And when he was clicking in Belleville, he was in that Josh Norris power play spot, and he was able to put up a lot of goals on the man advantage. And I think sometimes people forget about Roby Jarventie is he's 6'2", 214 pounds. Like, he's got the size, which allowed him to create space for himself in those high danger areas, like in the slot and even the high slot a little bit. And he was able to create the space he needed. And then once the teammate saw he's open, if it's on his tape, he can get rid of it quick and create a good scoring chance and more often than not score goals as well. I think it was tough, Ross. I think probably the writing on the wall for the new regime was when he came up to Ottawa and things didn't really go well for him. He wasn't really able to provide a full game in the bottom six, right? Like there was a couple opportunities where he had some offense. I feel like there was one game where it was like the first shift he had, he hit a post or something and everyone got really excited. But then after that, he just got out-muscled. He wasn't able to have any sort of B game. If he wasn't creating offensively, he wasn't doing much. And we'll get to it next segment, but those are actually kind of similar scouting reports to Xavier Bourgault. So I think these two players are more similar than people realize. I think Sens fans are trying to spin zone it the other way, that Roby is the guy that needs to round out his game and Borgo has a more rounded game. I'm not necessarily sure if that's true, but we'll dive into more of that next segment.
We certainly will. Good luck, Roby Jarventie, a guest of this show. Seemingly very good dude, well liked in the locker room, and we'll be rooting for him from afar going forward. But coming back in that deal is Xavier Bourgault, is Jake Chiasson. We should mention Ottawa sending a 4th-round pick the way of the Edmonton Oilers. More on the trade next, and then we'll look at the Senators' depth chart as we thought summer was dying down. Nuh-uh. Not on Monday, July 15th. Steve Staios making a trio of decisions. We'll get back to that next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends back with the Locked On Senators podcast. It's Mary J's. You guys know Mary J's is a locally owned cannabis dispensary in the Ottawa area. Started off with 3 best friends, including Dashy, making a life-changing decision and going after their dreams through hard work and dedication. They now have 4 stores in the Ottawa area. The Ottawa locations are Riverside South, Orleans. Ross and I checked out the Orleans store. It's an awesome spot. Greeley.
So clean.
And Russell. Yeah, the storefronts are great.
The art, the canvas inside, everything looks awesome.
Yeah, the artist that they had do the canvas, and then you got the vine wall in there. It's a great spot. And Mary J's offers the best and newest products in the market with many new additions to the menu every week. They got everything you need, whether you're a rookie or a vet and you want to be in and out of there, you already know what you want. They got you. They offer competitive pricing. In fact, they will price match any store in Ottawa. That means you're guaranteed to get the best price around at any Mary J's location. And they got the best customer service to go along with it. Friendly bud tenders who are always ready to assist. One of the owners, Dashy, is a diehard Sens fan. That's our guy. And you can go to one of the stores, say what up to Dashy, and pick his brain about the Sens and all the latest, greatest products that Mary J's has to offer. So check it out today, guys. Our friends over at Mary J's Dispensary.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed's your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Indeed doesn't just help hire faster either. 93% of employers agree that Indeed also delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to recent Indeed surveys. Join the more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Because you're a listener of Locked On Senators, you will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast, Locked On Senators. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, Pilsy. So here we are, mid-July, and the depth chart takes a big swing towards the new regime. Gone are Roby Jarventie and Kevin Mandolese in separate deals. We talked about Roby going to Edmonton, and our guy Mando is packing up and heading to Colorado, the mile-high city. We'll get into that trade in a little bit, but let's wrap up the first one. What is coming back to the Ottawa Senators in Xavier Bourgault? Pilsy went into his old draft archives, pulled up his 2021 scouting report, and we had him ranked, 25? And
21.
we were almost 21. We're almost bang on. He went 22nd overall to the Edmonton Oilers. Nobody remembers who goes 2-2. Wyatt Johnston, he of Dallas Stars All-Star fame. Now, to be fair, Wyatt Johnston played 0 games in his draft year because of COVID. That's just tip your hat to the Dallas Stars for getting that one right. I think you looked up where we had Wyatt Johnston too.
Yeah, Ross. This is a weird experiment because I've been scrolling through my 2021 prospect notes. I also saw our profile on our 55th ranked overall Tyler Boucher. That was funny to read.
5 stars.
Yeah, he was a 5-star guy for us.
5-star guy. He was.
How
many stars was Borgo?
Borgo, I had him as a 3-star guy. So here's the thing.
Be crazy if you ever had a 1-star guy.
Yeah, it would be crazy if I ever had a 1-star guy, imagine. But basically what I had wrote about Borgo before the draft was that this is a guy with a lot of offensive weapons. He's got a deceptive release that can fool goalies. He's very dangerous on the power play. Doesn't have any glaring weekends, although he could improve his skating, defense, and using other breakout options. And my final kind of notes, I always try to have a little concise my opinions on a player. If he's put into positions to succeed on a good power play, I think he could be unreal. Good player with a lot of offensive upside. So, I mean, that's kind of like what our prospect report was probably like with Roby Jarventie. I wasn't able to find my 2020 prospect reports, but similar type of guy where he's all offense and needs to round out his game. Now, keep in mind, those were my prospect notes before the 2021 draft. So there certainly has been some development from Borgo and Roby Jarventie since then, but definitely interesting to see the parallels between the two players.
And there's a good video on YouTube of all of his highlights from last year. It's about a 6.5-minute video. It seems like he's a bit of a shiftier player, a little more undersized, but he can get around the ice and does make great plays and has good vision. So the Senators, much like they did with Wyatt Bongiovanni and under construction with Jamieson Reese, they found a player who was not in a situation he was thriving, but they feel like there's more potential here. If he gets back to his QMJHL numbers, I mean, that would be exciting. However, I don't think that's realistic. I think what you're hoping is that he can use the smarts and the vision and the deception to be kind of a shiftier bottom 6 playmaker at the NHL level. I don't think it's going to happen this year. You're looking at a guy who is going to be in Belleville, hopefully in a top 6 role, more likely on the wing than at center, not only with the depth that Ottawa has at center with Ostapchuk, Halliday, and the vets all in front of him, in my opinion. When you look at Gaudette and who were we just talking about earlier, Pilsy? Yes.
And Garrett Pilon.
And Pilsy, exactly. So they've already got all those guys. I think you'd rather play the middle of the ice than Borgo, but with his kind of deception playmaking ability, I think that he could be a good playmaker from the wing. So I'm just curious to see what he looks like. Again, it's a Steve Staios identity that he's trying to create right now. And I think we're in an interesting spot where on paper, would I have done this trade? Probably not. I believe in Roby and his ability. And if he can stay healthy, then I think he could be a really good player at the NHL level. But we'll have to wait and see. As for Jake Chiasson, he was in the ECHL last year. Fun note on him, though. He actually played in Brandon with Ridley Gregg. So those two have chemistry from playing on the same team. And the same line together. Jake Chiasson is 21 years old as well. So he's a guy I think is just more for depth than anything else. But I do think that it's interesting to see the forward groups take shape at the Belleville level because they added all those veterans, those high earners at the AHL level. And now they're kind of plugging in the empty spots with some players who are projects, but who they see something in their skill set that they hope can pop.
I'd be interested to know the workings of this trade, Ross, because if this trade was Jarventie for Xavier Bourgault 1-for-1, I think I would have liked this trade more. It seems kind of because Chiasson was a 4th-round pick. It seems almost like it was Jarventie and Borgo 1-for-1, and then Chiasson for a 4th, which
well,
I'm not sure if that value adds up in my opinion, especially for a guy that spent almost all of the season in the ECHL. So adding Chiasson and a pick to the deal was kind of the head scratcher for me here.
Yeah, sure. For me, I look at the pick being like, hey, they know what next year holds. They already have 3 third-round picks. So in that range, it's just like, let's get a guy who's already 21. If they like him, it's accelerating he was a 4th-round pick. It's like you're getting a 2021 4th-round pick instead.
Yeah, I guess. But Ross, like, look at this draft. Perfect example. Some of our favorite picks from the draft were in the 4th round for the Sens. When you look at especially Montgomery, that's a guy we're excited about. So you can still get some talent in the 4th round. So I don't know. No offense to Jake Chiasson, but it just seemed like that was an extra move that I'm not really sure what the thought process was there. But I want to keep going on Bourgault here.
Yep.
EP wrote an article in February where they looked at Edmonton's prospect pool and targeted some prospects that might be on the move. And Xavier Bourgault was one of the guys they looked at. And a couple notes here. They write, it doesn't get much more concerning with the developing prospects than seeing their production take a step back in their age 20 to 21 seasons. So that's unfortunate that Borgo took a step back in that year. They also write, Borgo can score. He proved it time and time again in the QMJHL rather. His shot continues to be his best weapon. He can make plays for teammates too, provided them support as well. But to earn back a prime role and the support necessary to score consistently, he has to develop his two-way game even more, and he needs to win back puck battles from opponents. So that's where you're looking at a guy where when he has the puck, he's able to create and he's an effective player. But when he doesn't have the puck, he doesn't have a two-way game. He's not able to win back the puck after he's lost it in a puck battle. So those are some concerning things, but Ross, where I think Borgo can thrive, and I'll be honest, I don't know Bakersfield Condors depth charts and their power play lines and all that in depth, but in Belleville, especially with the players that they've added, Ross, he's going to have chances and he's going to have opportunities with line mates that are going to be able to help him succeed. And I hope we see him maybe not on the top power play unit in Belleville right away, Ross, but at the very least, this guy should be on the second unit because they need to give him the opportunity to do what he does best and then hope to round out the rest of his game along the way.
Half of his offense came on the power play last year. He only had 11 points at even strength in 55 games. So you're hoping that something improves in
like
Xavier
get him playing with Halliday on the power play, and I think you could see some real magic.
Well, Ottawa or Belleville at least is going to have to fill 2 one-timer slots on the power play when all healthy with Jarventie and Sokolov gone. There's going to be a lot of turnover down there. And for more on Belleville, you can check out yesterday's episode with David Bell, the head coach of the Belleville Sens. But there was another move made, and it was Kevin Mandolese heading to Colorado. We'll touch on Mando's tenure in the organization, and I'll look at the Senators' depth chart now midway through July and all of their unrestricted and restricted free agents we think taken care of. All right, next on Locked On Senators, your team every day. All right, Pilsy. So the moves have been made, the dust is settled, and now the Ottawa Senators are heading into the back half of the offseason with still enough cap space to hopefully add another bottom pair defender, maybe another depth forward to compete for a spot at camp. Where are you at with how the Senators look right now as an organization versus how they looked 3 weeks ago?
Well, Steve Staios certainly has put his mark on this team, Ross. I think that's very clear. He came into the offseason with a plan, and he looked at players that he thought either have plateaued or he wants to get a different style player in that position, and he shipped guys out. He seemingly isn't too concerned with the trade returns that he gets for these players. He more just wants to move on and create space for him to do his own thing, which you can argue whether that's a good ideology or not. That I'll hear both sides of that argument, to be honest. But I think, and this is what I've mentioned before, and I'll say it again because I think it's the best way to kind of wrap up how this has gone. Pierre Dorion built a collection of star players and hoped that talent would win, whereas Steve Staios is trying to build a proper team with guys slotted into roles and depth players that can support the talented players, and focusing more on veterans and providing a more stable, consistent type of roster than Pierre Dorion's run and gun. Let's hope all our talented young players can beat all of their talented young players and just let the rest play out how it will. So I think it's a welcome change in philosophy, and we'll see how successful it is.
The Ottawa Senators have nearly turned over half of their forwards signed to either one-way or two-way contracts since Steve Staios took over. At the NHL level, it's the 4 guys. Well, really 3, because Jan Jenik signed a two-way contract. So you've got David Perron, Michael Amadio, and Noah Gregor in that situation. Then Jan Jenik, Adam Gaudette, Xavier Bourgault, Jake Chiasson, Hayden Hodgson, Wyatt Bongiovanni, and Jamison Reese in those situations on two-way deals. So look, this team is still Pierre Dorion's team from my understanding, from the standpoint of 5 of your top 6 forwards and really 6 of your 7 best forwards, because I'd throw Pinto in the mix there. And even you could argue Ridley Gregg's knocking on the door if he takes another step next season, but he's not quite there yet. But 6 of the top 7 forwards are still Pierre Dorion guys.
But Ross, what you'll notice is we'll count McEwen. Only 2 of these players are not homegrown, drafted, and developed.
Yeah, that is.
Norris. I mean, Norris, I guess.
Developed.
Not, but yes,
he turned
developed.
Pro with Ottawa, right? With
yes,
Belleville.
Exactly. But that's where you look at, and certainly you can see the scouting and drafting of Pierre Dorion is very much the cornerstones of this roster.
It certainly is. And these are not line combinations. This is just a depth chart here as we go on to defense, where it's just one change at the NHL level. Out goes Jacob Chychrun and Eric Brandstrom, although he hasn't really been replaced per se. And
we should talk about Branny.
Yeah, why don't we? I don't have enough time in the day. But then they added a pair of AHL defensemen in Davies and Roos. On the left side, they lost others like Dylan Hetherington, so on and so forth. But I thought it'd be interesting to quickly pull up this graphic, because we pulled it up at the start of the offseason. And now there's some guys who are still unsigned, but they're all unrestricted free agents. Boris Kachuk didn't get his qualifying offer, so he can sign anywhere. And then Rourke Chartier, Josh Curry, and Dominic Kubalik still unsigned. We're hearing some reports that Josh Curry signed in the DEL, but nothing confirmed on that. Everything else taken care of, and it's July 16th. Did you think that any of these were going to linger beyond?
No.
That's confidence, man. The last couple of years would have told me otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. Even Mads Søgaard, I thought that should have been taken care of well before this. So that's a little bit surprising. But again, you see Staios's, and this can help us segue to the goalies and the final trade we haven't really got into with Mando. You see Staios's philosophies and what he's trying to do here, because often moves have he makes a move and then there's a reactionary move or signing that follows that related to that move, right? We had the dumping Joseph's contract, and then hours later, boom, Pinto signed, taken care of. Mads Søgaard gets a contract done. A day later, Mando is on the move. So you see Steve Staios obviously has ideas, but he needs to kind of get his ducks in a row before he can fully lay out his plan here. And it's great to have Mad Sogard back. Obviously, he's the top goalie prospect in this team's pipeline, and it's tough to watch a guy like Mando leave, Ross. He's a friend of the show, an amazing person. He comes from an amazing family. We had his dad on the show. We'll never forget that New York Islanders shootout win. What a moment.
What a debut. 46 saves, second most in a win in NHL history in a first NHL start.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you did a great job with that edit where we brought in Mads and Mando, and each of them told their stories of it with the highlights. So that credit to you there. Great video editing. But that story was just, it was one of those things where that season was going down the drain, and you had fun stories and positive moments for people that deserved it in Mando and Mads. So although it's sad that he's leaving, Ross, it is bittersweet because unfortunately, I don't think they could have rolled with another year of Mads, Mando, and Levy. It just hurts all of their development, right? You need Mads being the number one guy getting those games. He did have 32 games last season, but I want him to have even more games than that in Belleville. And then Levy and Mando, both of those guys are kind of past playing in the ECHL to develop them, right? Like it was kind of just like, all right, who draws the short straw today? Okay, Mando, you're going down to Texas for a little while. Okay, Levy, you got the short straw today. Now you're going to go to the ECHL for a bit. And you're just trying to juggle that and find playing time for everyone. And it just doesn't work, and it's not really fair to anyone. So it's nice that hopefully Mando will get a better opportunity over with the Colorado Avalanche organization.
We will definitely be following Mando's career from the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles when he won CHL Goalie of the Year and then made his first appearance on LOSP. He was telling us about Jean-Sébastien Giguère being his favorite goalie growing up, to then getting to see him and his best buddy be the two goalies in an NHL game. They had 3 games of NHL experience total when Mando had that night on Long Island. And let's not gloss over the fact that Mando was put into like some pretty tough situations. Remember that Calgary game at the end of the road trip from hell last year that started in Chicago? They threw Mando in that game, and there was a 0 probability they were going to show up for that game. They hung him out to dry that night. And then he had another awesome game. And I mean, like, I'm pretty much talking about all of his NHL games have been in these bad situations. Remember, he got put in against the Boston Bruins on the road. Like,
that's a tough one.
Another second half of back-to-back, and he had a .906 save percentage that night. That was the next game he played after the performance in his NHL debut. So he was put into some pretty tough situations. He also had a couple good call-ups where it's like, hey, just come on the trip, be our extra, get that NHL paper for a few days. So, hey, nothing wrong with that. We like seeing the guys getting paid.
And one last note about Mando. My God, does that guy have style? He put those NHL paychecks to use. His suit game was one of the top I've seen. I saw him at the rookie tournament in Buffalo. He was wearing this full 3-piece green suit, and he was rocking it. So that guy knows how to dress sharp.
Yes, he does. Best of luck to Mandolese's entire family, and Kevin himself will be following him in Colorado. Senators just get a 6th-round pick, and they have to give up a 7th. So unfortunate that there's not a whole lot of value coming back. But I think just even from the human standpoint of like, look, we've got an abundance of goalies in this age range. Let's get you somewhere like Colorado that you'll have an opportunity to play games in the AHL, show that you can take the next step, and who knows what can happen next. But happy Charles. I think he was a 4-time recurring guest. Maybe we'll have to have him back on for an exit interview as a #goalie friendly show. Final thing I want to pull up today, Pilsy, is the off-season checklist that we did at the start, because it's all completed now. At this point, we've kind of updated to put one more depth signing in order. But before the draft, this was right after the season. Hire a permanent head coach before the draft. Check. Figure out the goaltending situation. Yep. Check.
Woo,
probably
home run.
Like that was our top priority. Obviously, getting the coach right before the draft. They did that, but like getting
it was the most influential priority, I would say.
Sign Shane Pinto to a contract extension.
Bridge deal.
Acquire multiple impact two-way veteran players. Amadio, Perron, Nick Jensen would probably be in that order, I'd say. What you're hoping is the impactful veterans. and then restock the prospect cupboard at the 2024 NHL draft. I mean, they made all their picks outside of that first rounder they traded for the goalie. And that's what we said. You got to restock the pipeline. The players they chose is who they chose.
Yes.
But they restocked the cupboard for sure. There's more people in the cupboard than there were before the draft.
Yeah, definitely. They did a great job in the 4th round. So that was
all
well
4
done.
players, all 4 4th rounders they took. Really
3.
good picks. Yeah, all 4 that they took in the 4th round. Really good picks. Okay, Philsy, any final thoughts on today's show? Got a great interview coming up with Stephen Halliday tomorrow. Later this week, we will update, and I think the timing works out here well, that we'll do our updated off-season top 10 Sens prospects list, because, heck, there's been some movement to that list in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, that list is going to be very interesting. We will certainly compare last year's top 10 to this year's top 10 and see how things have changed. You got something there?
Well, we do it twice a year, right? We do one mid-season, like right after World Juniors when that starts heating up, and then one in the off season. So we've got one from February that we're going to be ready to cook with.
All right, love it. Final thoughts for me is I know we talked about it, but we are so stoked to have Mary J's back as a sponsor. They're going to be with us for a while. We love all of our sponsors. Mary J's, Glebe Central Pub, Farm to Fork, Shawarma Palace. So it's a big deal for us being able to keep these partnerships going. And Mary J's is a partner with the Locked On Senators podcast moving forward, and we're fired up about that. So to celebrate, go say what up to Dashy.
Yeah, what up, Dashy? Make sure you let them know that Locked On Senator sent you. I think it says a lot. Look, anybody can get a one contract type thing where it's like, hey, we'll give it a chance. But I think it says so much about the great people we surround ourselves with on this show that they're happy to come back and they're seeing value in it as well. So make sure to support our sponsors, to support us as we are rolling here 5 shows per week in the middle of the off season on a beautiful sunny summer day. But the season
in Manitoba, it's beautiful and sunny. It's at least in the Blue Mountains, it's raining all day, Ross.
Oh, is it? That's too bad. I feel really awful. It's 22 and sunny here. That's perfect. You're not like overheating. Nice. You're not, it's just, dare I say, it's perfect weather to head outside.
That's what everyone says about Winnipeg.
That's the opposite of Horatio Kane. He always takes off sunglasses, says something corny. I put them on.
Nice.
And everything I say seemingly is corny. All right, Pillsy, that's all I got. Your final thoughts. Appreciate you giving a shout out to our good friends Mary J's, and man, Farm to Fork getting a storefront.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So awesome. So we want big things ahead for all of our sponsors. And if you didn't see the Glebe Central Pub during the Euro final with all the English hooligans, I know it didn't end the way that they would have liked.
It's
it
not
didn't
coming
come home. But Glebe Central Pub always feels like home because the vibes are free at the GCP. So head in there, have a pint, have a bite, and make sure to stop by while you're doing your shopping at Lansdowne or whatever brings you to the Glebe. For today, we say goodbye. Thank you so much for watching, listening, engaging with the show, whether it's on Twitter at Sens Central, whether it's watching clips on YouTube, or if you just have the videos playing in the background while you're doing other things. They all count. They all help the show, and we very much appreciate that. Looking forward to a great chat with hockey nerd Stephen Halliday tomorrow. For today, we say goodbye. That's Brandon Piller. I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.